For those that are curious, for those that question and seek, this episode will find you in good company. We are interviewing an amazing gentleman, Mark Gober. This is Natural AF. I'm your host, Isaac.
And I'm Alexa.
And we met Mark at the Living Free Festival this year. He came over from the U.S. And some of you may have seen him on Alex Zek recently or in the last few months or whenever he was on there. And he's a great guy. It was so fun hanging out with him post-festival. And we get into some interesting topics, stuff that we've questioned, but it's interesting seeing it from his perspective and his background because, you know, no one's ever accused me of being the smartest guy in the room. So if I get in an argument or if I discuss something that people find challenging, I know a lot of stuff, but it just comes across different from someone who's actually written books about stuff and has researched it and has a little bit of a, you know, academic pedigree. Not that that really is what we rest on here at Natural AF, but it's good seeing a smart person say things that I've been saying to friends and family for the last few years.
I've got to say, since this episode, Isaac just couldn't stop mentioning like how dumb he is compared to Mark. But I think Mark just has a real gift for articulating things and putting them really simply. And as you'll hear, he never makes any claims. He doesn't claim to have all the answers, but what he does do is disprove a lot of mainstream narratives. And I love him for that because I think Mark is a great person to send people to, like his books and his work, for, you know, those types of people that need the scientific evidence, like they need all the proof. Mark's your guy.
Yeah. And there's a certain strategy that comes with playing dumb. It's a little bit of that Tucker Carlson, like, why is that? And I don't do that to play games, but yeah, I do like to life's a little easier when you're, minorly retarded.
Well, before we get into the episode, and you will see when we recorded this, we were in Sydney, so not our usual background, but we are back home. We just did another whirlwind trip to Sydney. We were there for exactly a week. We did the Freedom Summit down in Kenthurst. That was a 3-day event over the weekend. And
good times.
Yeah, it was an awesome event. They didn't get the turnout that they wanted, which was a shame. However, we still met so many amazing people. It was such a great event. Like, people were just raving about the speakers and how great they were. There were lots of workshops on, lots of amazing stall holders. We came back with a whole bag full of goodies because there was just so many good things on offer there. And it was such an honor and privilege to be there because, Kelly at My Self-Reliance is just such a gem and so well organized. Like, honestly, I'm so impressed in the event that she put on. And we're definitely keen to do the next one whenever that may be, probably next year.
Yeah. And I met some friends there now that are from the bear community. So I'm getting plugged into the Australian bears in New South Wales. It always sounds weird saying Wales. Yeah, it's cool. And I want to just add my energy to these groups, to these tribes, and reinvigorate it. Like, let's get the party going because there's so many cool things that we can do when we come together, but it's been easy. And I think people have been sort of lulled back to sleep a little bit when there's no immediate threat of lockdowns and all the other things that really invigorated people, 5 years ago or whatever. That's fine. I think it's natural, but it's also the people that are here. I just want to let you know, if you're listening to this, if you saw us at the festival, if you saw us at the Freedom Summit, thank you for participating and bringing your energy and bringing you're the kind of people that we want to be around.
Well, I'm excited to see where these groups go in the future. I think a lot of them, we're starting to see a bit of a convergence with all these separate groups. And I have this feeling that a lot more are going to start coming together and collaborating. And I'm not going to share too much more on that, but I think the Living Free Festival will be a really good example of that next year. We're going to be at another event next weekend. So Saturday, the 8th of November, we're going to be at the Harmonic Folk Festival, another group of amazing communities. That's Harmonic Folk that Kata Miller has founded, who we had on recently with her husband, Barney Miller, and the Remedy Collective group, who we've had Melissa Cooksh on previously, and they've collaborated on this incredible event up on the Sunshine Coast. So we're going to be there next Saturday, the 8th of November. We'll put the link in the show notes if you want to grab tickets. It's going to be lots of fun. We're going to have a stall there for natural art form. I'm also going to have a stall and I'm going to be doing mini human design readings. So I'm super, super stoked for that. And I hope to see some more of our listeners there too.
Yeah. And that's, human design readings that are like short in length, not for miniature humans. Although if you bring your miniature humans, she'll do a human design reading for them too.
I can do kids. Yeah, I can look at kids' human design charts for sure.
Yeah. And speaking of collaborations, so if you don't know, we're collaborating with Alex Zek and The Way Forward. We're offering a 10% discount on their community. And if you're a member of The Way Forward, you get 20% off every order of natural art form products, anywhere in the world. So if you're in the States, if you're in Australia, go on The Way Forward's website, sign up into the community, and let's keep connecting. Let's build the foundation of the community that's going to rise to meet the challenges that the parasitic class doesn't want us to do. But we're going to do it anyways. We've already done it. We've already stepped in. So continue to step up, continue to find ways to connect and support the show, support people that you like, that you want to see flourish, and support yourself, because we're here to create things to help people find more freedom and independence in their health and in their life. And we're making things to support that lifestyle. So.
And another way you can support us and this show, if you enjoy the episodes, please, wherever you're watching or listening, like and share the episodes with other people that you think will enjoy it. We're more often now we're going to these events and we're meeting lots of people, and we're just finding more and more people that are listening to our podcast. So we're so grateful. Thank you so much for our listeners. Thank you so much for our regular listeners that have been with us from the beginning. So that's one way you can support us. And another way is, of course, by supporting your own health and purchasing natural art form products through our website, naturalartform.com. Like Isaac said, we ship worldwide. So whether you're in the US or Northern Hemisphere, or whether you're down south here in Australia or New Zealand, you can get our flagship product Alleviate worldwide. You can now get our Refresh deodorants worldwide. And if you're down south here in Australia and New Zealand, you can also get our advanced skin repair lotion Regenerate. So
it's fast becoming a bestseller. It's going to rival Alleviate, I think. So.
Yeah. And it's going to be coming to the States soon, guys. We're working on it. So we want to have that over there very soon. And of course, if you head to the website and you're not on the mailing list already, join the mailing list. There'll be a pop-up that comes up as soon as you jump on the website, and you'll get a 10% off discount code. Or, of course, you can always use the code NaturalAF10, and that'll give you 10% off all orders, no matter how many times you order, and that is special to our Natural AF listeners.
All right, guys, that's all the updates we have for you today, so let's get into the episode.
Let's do it. Mark Gober is the author of the Upside Down series of 7 books, spanning the topics of consciousness, politics, economics, UFOs, medicine, cosmology, and much, much more. Mark is also the host of the 8-episode podcast series, Where Is My Mind?, which explores the scientific evidence for telepathy, the afterlife, and more. Previously, he was an investment banking analyst in New York and a partner at a Silicon Valley strategy firm. Since 2019, he has served on the board of the Institute of Noetic Sciences and is a well-respected speaker and researcher in his field.
Well, welcome to Natural AF, Mark. It's cool to have you on here. You're down there in Austin, Texas, close to my old stomping grounds. I grew up near Wichita Falls, and it's exciting. We saw you down here at the Living Free Festival. I was emceeing. I didn't actually get to hear your talk because I was back and forth to my stall, but so I'm excited for this interview because I'm like, there was a lot of really cool
I just caught the end of your talk, and I just thought it was hilarious. That was the first thing I said to you when I met you. I was like, you could literally turn that into a comedy routine.
It was fun.
So do it all again for me now.
We'll do it again. But it was great to hang with you two in person, and thank you for having me today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So great to have you on. We've had you on our list for quite some time, and then when we saw you were going to be at the Living Free Festival, I was like, I'll just invite him in person.
I love it.
Awesome. Well, look, we always open it up and kind of give you the floor. So for anyone that doesn't know you, which in our circles, I don't think there's anyone that doesn't know who you are now, just kind of share a little bit of your personal journey and sort of what led you to now be in this space that you're in and the work that you do and writing all the books that you've written.
Well, I can take you to the end of the story first, which is where we are now.
Yeah.
And the place that I've landed is that there are many, many, many things that we've been taught are true that have not been verified. And that's where the comedy starts to come in. And it's from medicine to cosmology to the science of consciousness to everything. And the logic of it becomes hilarious when you dig into the beliefs that we're told were true. But when you actually dive into it, you realize there are stories that are created. And those stories are told to us as if they're basically pure truth, even if the scientists say, well, we just believe this to be true. It becomes dogma. And then we collectively stop looking at other possibilities. And we've ended up with worldviews that are upside down, which leads into my book series, which I didn't even come up with the name of my first book, by the way, An End to Upside Down Thinking. That was my publisher. I wrote the manuscript and send him so let's take even more steps back. My background, I'm very mainstream. So for undergrad in the US, I went to Princeton. I was a competitive tennis player, one of the captains of the team there. So like Division I tennis, like hours a day of practice. So you can imagine, really focused on school and tennis and social life and not sleeping. Very competitive with myself, like always wanted to succeed. So because of that, I didn't really have time to think about why I was doing anything that I did. I was just going through the motions because there was a new challenge in front of me and I didn't allow myself to lose or fail. And if I did, I'd freak out. So you could imagine like the hamster wheel that I was on. It was like sprinting on a treadmill. And I didn't really have time to think about what I wanted to do in life. So I just ended up doing what my classmates did because it sounded prestigious and it sounded like it would be a good start to my career, which for me was investment banking. That was one of the coveted things you could do. Coming out of Princeton, most people, when I graduated in 2008, it was investment banking or strategy consulting. Those are the two big things. So I got a job at UBS, one of the large investment banks based in Switzerland, but I was in the New York office, started in the summer of 2008 during the financial crisis, and it was brutal. I did not sleep. I was not playing tennis or working out very much, sitting at my desk all day and all night and not sleeping. So it was a brutal period to think back on. I can't even believe that I did that. But that was par for the course. That's just how it worked. And I was actually in the group at UBS that was responsible for advising financial institutions, meaning my clients were banks and insurance companies and asset managers. All the companies that were having big time problems in 2008 were my clients. And I was at a bank that was having problems because all the banks were having problems. And therefore it was an extra stressful time. I remember my entry level class. It was, I forget how many of us that were in groups all over, like New York, San Francisco, and so forth. They ended up cutting 10% of my class within the first few months, just because everyone was, the banks had to lay off. That was the environment that I was in. And I knew I didn't want to stick around for that forever. So I left. I got connected through one of my college classmates to another firm that was a spin out of the Boston Consulting Group. So one of the big strategy consulting firms. They were starting their own thing. And it was sort of like what I did in New York. We were advising on mergers and acquisitions, like helping companies buy and sell stuff, basically. But they were also focused on the strategy element as it pertained to intellectual property. So I did a lot with patents and inventors. And I had to learn about how technology worked and then explain it to business leaders and things like that. And that's what I did for about 10 years. Started off in the office in Boston, and then most of my time was in Silicon Valley. I made it to partner at my firm. So that was my trajectory of like, just try to succeed. It did not end well because at a certain point, I couldn't really continue in the same way because I didn't have a sense of meaning or purpose. And this was in 2016 when things really started to hit the fan for me, because there were some business deals I had been working on and really cared about, and they didn't go the way that I wanted. There was some injustice, and I saw a lot of corruption actually in the business world, which has helped me in my writing endeavors. And then some things in my personal life didn't go the way that I wanted. So I was just feeling super lost, not knowing why I was doing what I did, not knowing where I was going. And I started listening to podcasts. which in 2016, they were a bit newer. And I ended up listening to shows on alternative health and ways that people were healing themselves. And that was just something that was interesting for me to do, which led me to lots of podcasts on things like meditation or people talking about psychedelics, which I didn't feel comfortable trying. But it was interesting that people would take a certain substance and they would get better, like their anxiety would get better. So I was looking into alternative things, sensory deprivation, float tanks, where you sit in a pod with salt water.
Hot for a while. Yeah.
I started doing them. And this was before any writing, but there was a place in San Francisco, I believe it's called Reboot. And I would sit in there at least for an hour. Sometimes I did multi-hour sessions. So I was experimenting a little bit. And then one day I was listening to Extreme Health Radio, which is still a great podcast that's out there. And I had listened to many episodes and I was just going in order. The next one up in August of 2016 was a woman named Laura Powers who talked about psychic abilities. That she was a psychic and worked with energies and interdimensional beings like angels and things like that with her clients. And the hosts of the show, who I had heard on many other episodes, who I took pretty seriously because they seemed to be discerning and I was surprised that they were taking this woman seriously. I didn't know what to make of that because my worldview at the time was atheistic, agnostic. If you believe in spiritual things, you're just superstitious. And science tells us that stuff's not real. That's where I was. Yeah, and then, wait, what's going on here? Why is this woman talking very seriously about it? And it was enough for me to then, at the end of the podcast, listen to Laura's recommendation of her own podcast. It's called Healing Powers, which I've now been on a number of times myself, full circle. But I listened to all of her episodes from 2016 back to 2011. I binged it because it was person after person describing psychic abilities, the afterlife, this idea of interconnected reality, the idea that there's a soul and a soul's purpose. And some of it was scientific, some of it was anecdotal. It was enough for me to say, I can't reason that every single person here is delusional or lying or colluding. Like something is going on. I really need to investigate this because everything I believed has to be questioned, like about reality, about what it means to be a human being. And that led me to read books and scientific papers and like declassified documents from the CIA talking about psychic spying. The University of Virginia has a division of perceptual studies that looks into the afterlife and near-death experiences. The Institute of Noetic Sciences, which studies the statistical evidence for many phenomena like telepathic abilities and energy healing and lucid dreaming. I'm now on the board of that organization, but this was all brand new to me. So I didn't even know who to talk to. Most of my friends were just, in the Silicon Valley world. And I became obsessed because I wanted to understand what was reality. And it felt like a death and rebirth in hindsight. The version of me for the first 30 years of my life basically died. And I reached the max of what I could do there. And then this rebirth happened of, okay, what am I doing? And when I started this, there was no plan to be writing. I mean, I was still at my firm. And fast forward to the summer of 2017, I got an idea to summarize the findings that I had been looking into for a year. And I said, why don't I put this into a book? Maybe I'll be able to reach business-minded people because I know how they think. So I wrote that book, which I then got very lucky to hear about Bill Gladstone of Waterside Productions. And I reached out to him and he responded to me. I was this no-name person, not in the writing world, but he read my email somehow. And he gets a lot of inbound requests. So it felt like something faded in a way. But he responded to me, I think it was the same day, and said, here's a contract. And then I decided to publish with him because he was my literary agent. He sadly passed away recently, but he was going to reach out to publishers. And we said, why don't we just publish through Waterside because we could do it much faster. And the book was published in 2018. And Bill is the one who came up with the title, An End to Upside Down Thinking. And then, so that was, the book came out in the fall of 2018. I was like, okay, I wrote a book. Cool. I just made partner at the firm. Let's see if I can have these interests outside of the office. I'm in a great position professionally. My buddy from high school reached out to me, who's in the podcasting world. And he said, hey, Mark, why don't we take the material from your book and turn it into a podcast? We'll make it like an 8-episode docuseries. And that's called Where Is My Mind? It's available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And so that came out in the fall of 2019, and it's got like 50 interviews, and there are 50 full-length interviews, which are really long. And then there's the 8-episode series, which includes clips from those interviews that are interspersed into a narrative where my buddy, who's the producer, and I are having a conversation. So that's fall of 2019. the podcast came out. I had the first book, and then thinking about 2020 in the business. What are we going to be doing? And I just felt very lost again. And then thinking to myself, I don't want to do this anymore. I feel like I'm splitting my energy between things that I'm passionate about that seem to be very important about, like, who are we and why are we here? These are very relevant questions. And yet I'm in these client meetings that I just don't care about in the same way that I used to. And it's not fair to anybody involved. So I made this decision to leave the firm. I told my business partners I was going to leave. I wasn't going to a competitor. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So this was end of 2019, early 2020. Of course, not consciously knowing what would happen in the world. Then the whole world shut down. I had left my firm. In the early 2020, before everything really hit with COVID, I wrote the second book, An End to Upside Down Living. And then, so that book was done, and then the lockdowns hit. And I started to see what was happening in the world in terms of censorship, censoring people that asked questions, like doctors who had opinions that countered the mainstream. And I thought to myself, I've seen this in the business world. This is not like just conspiracy theory. Something's very wrong here, because I thought I had a good handle on the nature of reality based on what I had written in my first two books. I thought I had it, maybe not 100%, but directionally I was good. And then we hit 2020, and all the people that I respected spiritually, many of them, were going along with the narrative and saying, yeah, everyone should be locked down, wear the masks, get the jab. If you ask questions, then you're a Trumper, or making like political suggestions about people and saying, really crazy stuff that we all remember. And I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, so, okay, I need to rethink life again, because I clearly missed something in these first two books. I think there's a lot of value there, but there's something about a darker side of reality that I didn't understand exists. And that led me to look into politics. So I wrote a book called An End to Upside Down Liberty, which talks about voluntarism, which is basically having all governing services in the private sector rather than in a compulsory monopoly, which is government. And then I wrote a book called An End to Upside Down Contact, which is about UFOs, aliens, and spirits. And the reason I went into that is that I wanted to understand the dark and light forces that might be intervening in our world from a spiritual perspective, like not just physical beings, but maybe interdimensional beings. And I looked at what people had to say about that. Then I wrote An End to the Upside Down Reset, which is about the World Economic Forum's plan for society, which they called the Great Reset. There's even a book called COVID-19, The Great Reset. Anyone can get it on Amazon, written by Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum and his colleague Thierry Malloret. And I show that it's basically a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's something that is marketed to us as a very positive change for the world that they want to enact, but it's actually not pro-freedom. Yeah. Then the last two books, I wrote An End to Upside Down Medicine, which challenges many aspects of the allopathic approach to medicine, including looking at the germ theory of disease, the questions about the existence of viruses, or whether in the alternative there are other reasons people get sick that are not the specific viral entity that people talk about. And then most recently in 2024, the seventh book was published, An End to the Upside Down Cosmos, which looks at where do we live, basically challenging the Big Bang model, challenging and questioning, is Earth moving? How far away is the sun? What are these lights in the sky? All those kinds of questions. And here we are today. I'm not working on another book right now. I don't know exactly what's going to be next creatively, but I have not returned to my firm, and I'm in this place consistently of, I'm not really sure what's next, but life seems to bring me something.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Love it.
Which of your books would you say got the most flack? Like which one sent up the most amount of resistance?
Great question. It's a hard one to answer, because the first book, An End to Upside Down Thinking, is probably the most well-known. There are people who don't even know I've written more books since then.
Oh, wow.
That book, I have received praise for it. People told me they liked it, but then I do get some people who say that it's crazy talk. And so I have gotten some pushback from it. The other books, it just depends on who reaches out to me. And what I find in general, even with my first book, is that I don't hear from that many people. So it's hard for me to tell what the feedback actually is.
Okay.
And it's not like Malcolm Gladwell or Prince Harry or something selling massive numbers of copies. So it's like, it takes a bit of time for the books to even circulate before I could get feedback. But with each book, I would say, Isaac, that I lose more and more people. So it's like, book one and book two, people with a spiritual perspective, they're like, okay, yeah, Mark got it right. And then I'm talking about liberty. And then they say, okay, this guy's crazy. Those on the left in particular, they're like, no, Mark went off the deep end. And then I have a bunch of people with me through all the political stuff and even the alien stuff. And then I'm questioning viruses and whether bacteria, definitely they exist, but are they causing disease, or are bacteria in the alternative just helping the body clean up underlying toxicity? Things like that gets people upset, I learned. And looking at injections, are they safe and effective? Is there science suggesting that they are safe and effective? People get upset about that. And then they'll say things like, well, you're falling for a psyop by even writing about this. And then, of course, the cosmology book questioning the globe model, whether Earth is an oblate spheroid shape with a radius value of roughly 4,000 miles at the equator, spinning and flying through space in the ways that we're told. Asking questions like that apparently is problematic for some people.
Yeah, well, that's actually what I was going to ask, was because you mentioned you just kind of lost more and more people. Like, because just hearing your story, I feel like it's such a rite of passage for so many people to go through what you went through. Like, when you said like it just gets, because I experienced that when it got to a point where I was like working in jobs that just felt meaningless. Like I just got to this point where I was just like, what? This is not my purpose. Like I'm not meant to be just working this 9-to-5 job just to make money. And it felt so empty. And I think that's a huge catalyst for a lot of people to make a big shift in their life and start looking into all of these sort of rabbit holes as to who we truly are and why we're here. So my question was, like, throughout that period, like, did it affect your relationship with your family or your close friends? Because I know, especially like during what happened during COVID and, from 2020 onwards, unfortunately for a lot of people, they did lose family and they did lose friends completely because there was just such a big divide that people couldn't overcome. So how, like, as that progressed with you writing the books and researching all this stuff, like how did that affect your close relationships, especially with your family? I just wanted to, like, that's what piqued my interest, because when you said your trajectory of life, again, I feel like so many people can relate to, like, yeah, I finished high school and then I went to college or here university and then I got a good job, and, because that's what my parents expected and that's just what everyone in our family's done. And they just, like you said, they just go through the motions. And so I can imagine when you deviate from that, it can have often a significant impact on those relationships.
For sure. And I would say it's continued in that direction because I've gotten more and more esoteric. So I feel like, fortunately for me, it's been less confrontational than it has been for other people that I know who are on our path, where I haven't had too many fights, but it's like people have drifted away. And the first cut was when I was going super spiritual. I remember one of my good buddies, he's a doctor now, and I was sharing with him the science of psychic abilities and the statistical evidence for phenomena that suggest consciousness is beyond the brain, and that our brain's like an antenna, things like that, which means, okay, maybe there's a soul. That's very radical for a lot of people, including me 9 years ago. And he goes, Mark, you might be right about this stuff, but my life is pretty good the way it is, and I don't want to rock the boat. So, I mean, naturally, it's understandable for sure. Yeah. And different life situations. So I'm not married with kids. He is, for example. So I have a lot more freedom in that way. But that mentality, I tell that story because there are many other people who are like that.
Oh, 100%.
It's like, well, okay, there are other things that are more important to me and I don't want to do that. To me, there's nothing more important than getting to the truth about the nature of reality, because unless we do that, how do we know how to live or what to prioritize? So what I just said there, that automatically puts me in a different category than a lot of people in my circles. And I would say friends and family members, generally speaking, have been overall supportive of, okay, you're following your passions, Mark. Certain things that I talk about upset people more than others, depending on the friend or family member. Yeah. Political stuff I find is very, that can rile people up, especially the left. And my book, An End to the Upside Down Reset, is a critique of leftism, because I was so frustrated by intelligent people that fall for everything with regard to the narrative. And basically, if it's not written in the New York Times, then you're a conspiracy theorist and a Nazi, like absurd things, which somehow is still occurring. And so you can imagine living in Silicon Valley in New York and having that background. There are a lot of people in that realm who, many of them don't even know I've written about that. Again, I'm fairly certain most people who have known me for a long time just know I've written on things that might be alternative, but they don't even know what I'm writing about.
Yeah.
The ones who do, they might get a little triggered or upset by that. And I have had a lot of people that are supportive, even if they don't agree or if they're not even fully on board, like some family members who are just, okay, like, it's great that you're questioning this stuff and we're happy you're following your passions. So I've shifted social circles definitely. And it seems to be ongoing where certain doors have closed or faded out. A lot of new relationships have opened, like meeting you two or going to Confluence, Alex Zeck's festival in Bandera, Texas. So it's become actually more social in the last year and a half for me. It wasn't social for a while. I was just writing by myself, and now I'm meeting people, which is fun.
Yeah. How was that Confluence? I know there was kids reading with blindfolds on, and I'm really fascinated by that kind of stuff. But what was it like being around that kind of people that like close for that, few days or whatever? It
was awesome. I mean, I went to Confluence. I spoke in 2024 and 2025 this year. And Confluence 2024 felt like my first real social event with the crew of people who looked at life the way I did. And that was incredible for me to be surrounded by that, because I did feel pretty isolated, even though I was writing and maybe connecting on some level with people. It's very strange. And you might appreciate this as content providers, content creators. You put something out, and most people who absorb your content, you never hear from. And you don't even know they absorbed the content. And as a writer, or even doing podcasts like this, sometimes I'll hear from someone who says, oh, I have a friend who liked your book or something. And it surprises me because it's an isolating process, what I do. No matter how many people might be reading the books, it feels like no one is in a lot of ways. And then to go to Confluence and to be around all these people who think like I do, I felt at home for the first time. And then going back this year was incredible. I also went to Music and Sky, Mike Winter and crew's festival. That was in 2024, which was great to meet and more people and also be with people that I had met at Confluence. So I recommend those two festivals to your audience highly. Confluence in Texas and Music and Sky, which historically has been in California. We didn't have Music and Sky this year. And also Living Free Festival in Australia.
Yeah. Well,
these events really do change lives. I remember that from, I did a short stint in a network marketing company. And one of the things that they hammered down was like, events change lives. And I always remember that because it does. Like I went to my first network marketing event in San Diego. I'm from Wyoming, and met Robert Kiyosaki, a longtime hero of mine, an author and conspiracy theorist and all that stuff. Badass. And that for me was like this cool interaction between a lot of the stuff you talked about. There's, the banking, the conspiracy side. He was from the military. But these events, it's not just being around like-minded people like a bubble, but there's something there that I feel like you could probably say there's supernatural things going on. We've had different people that can see beyond the veil, see like ancestors and stuff show up at the Living Free Festival. So was there some deeper elements of stuff that you experienced with Music and Sky or Confluence?
For me, it was more just the social element. Those other things that you're talking about, I had more exposure to in my explorations of hiring psychics or working with different healers that were doing things that I couldn't explain with normal science, or channeling entities. So that stuff I have had a lot of exposure to, and maybe there's a little bit of it at those festivals. And for me, it's been more just getting to hang out with people and hear their stories. Yeah. It's like it's a meeting ground of people that might have been isolated in their respective areas and then coming together.
Yeah, and it's so funny because Isaac you went to Music and Sky a couple of times, didn't you?
When you were in the States? I went once.
Oh, you were meant to go again when you came to Australia.
Yeah, 2022, I think.
Anyway, so he had been to Music and Sky. I had heard of Music and Sky, and it's just so crazy because when I first met Dave from Living Free, and we were doing the working bee, so we would see them every month, every couple of months for about a year. And I'll never forget the first time we met. I was like, we got to bring Music and Sky over, because I think I'd listened to an interview with Mike Winner where he was like, we're happy to you can do a Music and Sky event anywhere in the world. We're happy to give you the framework basically and you do it. And I said that to Dave. I was like, we got to do it. And he's like, yeah, for sure. Yeah, we should totally do a festival. And I didn't know until actually very recently that they had also talked about just putting on a festival for people to come together. And because that's what the Living Free movement is all about. Like, that's what the platform is all about, is like bringing people in that are like, you know, wanting to question things. It's not about like everyone has to think the same things. It's just like, we're willing to question. We're obviously like not, you know, part of the mainstream society. And, you know, going to the Living Free Festival, and that's what Isaac said. It's the same thing as like when he was at Music and Sky and at the Betaria Festival. It's like meeting, what's that saying? I love it. It's like meeting old friends for the first time. Mm-hmm. And the way that you connect with people, it's like, it's not like this small talk, surface level conversations you have with people. It's like you'll meet someone for the first time, and in that first conversation, you're talking about like flat earth and like, yeah, it's so bullshit that the earth is round. Like, it makes no sense. And it's like, and then you walk away and you're just like, I would never have that conversation with someone in my everyday life, like just out in the street. And it just brings this whole other, it's a different resonance. So like Isaac said, it's not just about like, oh, I'm just going to be around people that like think all the same as me, like, you know, for 3 days. It's so far beyond that, because we all still have like, you know, varying beliefs, and we're at different stages of, you know, quote unquote awakening. But it's just it's this different resonance. And I think the way that people connect is very different to what we're used to in a mainstream society.
Yeah, it feels to me like, even though certain people I've known for a year and a half or less, that I know them very well, that they're close friends now. And it's because of what you described, Alexa.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
What do you think is the difference in why you have the ability to explore these beliefs? I mean, even going so far as like writing entire books about these topics that people can't even look at. Mm-hmm. And you're from the same background-ish, you know, to a lot of the people, you know, your peers. On the surface, there's nothing, you know, all that different about you. But what was it about you that made you open to, and then going like hard into these areas that people are like so afraid of?
It's a deep question, because I would guess it has to do with something on a soul level, but I don't know for sure. Because why was I pulled so hard? That's a great question. I learned about these things, and a lot of people might learn about these topics, and they're not going to drop everything they're doing and just read books every minute outside the office, which is what I was doing. There was some part of me that was extremely pulled for the first time in my life that I can remember, where there was a real passion versus just doing something because I wanted to win, or because it seemed prestigious, or whatever, because I wanted to accomplish it. This was, I want to actively learn this stuff, because to me, like I said before, what could be more important than understanding the nature of reality? We need to understand what this place is, who we are, and why we're here, in order to even know what we should be doing. So it's so foundational that nothing was going to stop me. That's how it felt.
So on that point, because we talk about this a lot on this podcast, and I've definitely got some very strong opinions about the agendas behind that. So I'll put the question to you. What do you think is the purpose behind deceiving us and really steering us away from knowing who we truly are and this realm that we live in?
Well, the notion of deception that you're speaking of is one that I was less interested in when I started, or less focused on. I saw a lot of it as innocent ignorance. It's a lot of professors who have been taught one thing and they're making assumptions, and to them, they have too much pride to admit that they're wrong. So then they tell any scientist who questions the narrative that they're pseudoscientists. And it's just the hubris of academia, which I think exists. But what you're speaking about, Alexa, is deeper. And that's where I have veered clearly as well, that there are dark forces that seem to want to keep us from basic truths. And that's why there are so many books in my book series now of things that are upside down. I mean, it's very frustrating to think about how many years I spent in school being concerned about getting an A in class, where I learned about something that I don't think is true anymore. Unbelievable. How much stress and how much sleep I lost over that. Oh my goodness. And how many people are getting indoctrinated in the system, and then they're going into professions preaching things that we can show haven't been demonstrated. So there's something really nefarious going on. And I've been drawn to, I've been interested in ancient texts. It's something I would love to go into more deeply. I feel like I only have a surface level view of them. But one that comes to mind right now is the Nag Hammadi scriptures These were found in 1945 in Egypt. They were bound books hidden in jars from a few hundred years post-Jesus. So this is known as Gnostic Christianity. But some of the tales within the Nag Hammadi scriptures talk about origin stories, the origin of humanity, the origin of the cosmos. And it basically goes something like this, that there is one entity, oneness, God, let's call it, that is the source of all reality. And that being spawned off other individuations of itself. And after a few generations of individuations, there was a being named Sophia in the text. And Sophia had a son who was rogue. And I believe he didn't have a father, which I don't even know how that makes sense. But something went wrong with this miscreant son named Yaldabaoth. And he then created a world where the humans would have the divine spark breathed into them, but they would be kept in ignorance about their nature. And this rogue being and his minions, it was their job to keep humanity in ignorance. And this led to the imprisonment of humanity. One of the quotes, which I'll paraphrase, stood out to me when I read it, of like, oh my goodness, this describes our world. It says, the rulers threw humanity into a state of confusion and a life of toil so that they would be distracted with things of the world and not have time to focus on the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, seems like what we're
That
experiencing.
hits a nail on the head.
Yeah.
And what do you feel is, because I don't know. So sometimes I go back to like the body and what I feel, especially at being, if you're, going to the human design stuff, a sacral man gen, I get like a But what do you feel about the Gnostic worldview as far as like prison planet, loosh harvesting, you're trapped in a reincarnation cycle, like that kind of.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on how we define Gnostic. And a lot of people I've heard throw that term around, and it's not often tied to specific parts of the texts. And from what I've read, I mean, you could read into the Gnostic texts, like the Nag Hammadi scriptures, this notion of a reincarnation trap, I think. But at least from what I've read, and I haven't read every single one, there's a lot of writings, maybe it alludes to that. But what has resonated for me is the notion that there are dark forces that keep humanity in ignorance. But Isaac, your question about whether there's a reincarnation soul trap, it's something I have looked into for the last several years. And I land at, we really can't know with certainty. We cannot verify it either way, because a soul trap believer can take anything from a near-death experience that someone comes back with and flip it on its head and say, well, that's just deception. You can always make that claim. I don't know. Is it possible that each of us has a different journey as a soul, where some people face deception in the afterlife and others don't? Or maybe it's shifted, where at some point in history there was a trap element and at other times there isn't. So I think it might not be black and white, but there are many people that come back from near-death experiences, and it seems like what they're coming back with is very positive. And it's hard for me to think that it's all just deception. So for example, Anita Morjani, she famously recovered from cancer during a near-death experience. She had tumors all over her body. She was dying in a coma. And she had these amazing realizations in another realm. She encountered her deceased father and resolved some conflict with him. She realized things about her own thinking that she then reversed when she was resuscitated, and her tumors disappeared. Doctors didn't know what happened. And so now she speaks all over the world talking about the importance of love and that there are these higher dimensions, and this saved the woman's life. And she's speaking about things that are hard to say are negative. But when I talk to people who believe in the reincarnation soul trap, they'll say, she is now a propagandist of those other dimensions. There's always an answer for it. And then they'll say things like, if a near-death experiencer talks about feeling unconditional love, that was just a love bomb that was given to the person to make them think it's all benevolent, and they come back in the world and then express that it's all benevolent. How can we know?
It sounds like the kind of person that's just like the buzzkill at the party, where it's like, all right, yeah, Mark's here. Yeah, Mark, he doesn't like me.
Well, it also just really shows how strong our beliefs are. Like, and who did we speak about this with? When we had Jerry Marzinski on, he talked about, and he did some little experiments himself with, people he knew, about how when people can't make sense of something, they'll fill in the gaps. their mind
Right.
will come in and fill in the gaps to make it make sense for them. And I think that's like what you're talking about just speaks so much to that. Like, and I mean, we saw it during COVID with, even beyond COVID, just with the vaccine issue in general. People will like die for the cause. They're just like, vaccines are the best thing that ever happened. And it's like, if you don't even have to go digging that deep to see that vaccine science is pseudoscience. Like, there is no credible evidence that vaccines are safe and effective. And you really don't have to look that hard, but they won't even look at it because the belief supersedes everything. And they will make anything make sense to fit that belief.
Totally. And so where I have, after having explored so many paradigms and speaking about them publicly and always having to be careful about things, I try to go back to what can we actually verify? And if we can't verify something, then it's just a matter of belief. And that's how I try to look at it. So when people are arguing
I
about,
like the way you look at it.
if they're arguing about vaccines, then let's look at the data. Are there studies demonstrating safety and efficacy using the scientific method and controlled double-blind placebo trials and things like that? These things are objective. With regard to the soul trap, nothing is going to be objective because we're always relying on someone's account and we don't know what's happening in those other realms of consciousness. I think there is benefit in questioning. So for me, when that time comes in the afterlife, I definitely want to be discerning as to what beings appear and not necessarily trusting every being. And I can't remember who it was. Someone said that when you encounter a being, they're under some kind of natural law obligation to answer the question. If you say, reveal your true identity, something like that. So I think those are important ideas, but then getting wrapped up into definitively saying it's a soul trap. After you die, you go into a light and that's going to recycle your soul. And it's all just harvesting negative energy. I wonder if that is too rigid and there might be more nuance to it. Certainly there could be beings harvesting energy. I mean, one of the phenomena that I looked at, which I don't even like talking about, which is satanic ritual abuse. And survivors of that horrific phenomenon will talk about how during this sophisticated torture that happens, ritualistic ancient methods of torture that are used to summon demons, because the beings feed off of this fear and suffering in those ceremonies, the beings do come in, allegedly. This is what survivors will say. And the beings then give the practitioners power. So it's like selling your soul. So there is some precedent for that notion of beings that feed off of human energy. So who knows? It could be there. But my point is about like getting too wrapped up into one model when we actually cannot verify any of it.
Yeah. And I see a little bit of this, I don't fully describe it, but you know, when you see a pattern and it's promoted, right, by the system, so to speak, I'm always a little bit suspicious of it. So, but it's this Gnostic thing. It's very like undertone. Like if you know it, you recognize it. But there's like, for instance, TV shows, I think it was on Amazon Prime. Originally, I think it was HBO, but it was His Dark Materials. You may be familiar with that one, but it was about kind of like the Golden Compass movie. These books about the Golden Compass.
Yeah, it was based on the books.
Interesting stuff. But as I'm watching it, I'm like, oh, this is like following the line of some of these Gnostic teachings about the demiurge. And it was pretty much, it might have even been mentioned by name in that or some form of it, but there was Metatron, you know, the angel Metatron, and he's like usurped the throne of God, which if God's God, that's not possible. So this Metatron guy, and then there's other elements, but I'm like, oh, this is just a Gnostic retelling of this thing. And then I'll see another movie, and that one was pretty on the nose, but there's other ones where I'm like, oh, this is, and I'll point it out to Alexa. I'm like, oh yeah, here it goes again. Here's the Gnostic script going through this whole thing. And so if I see it in big mainstream movies, I'm like, there's probably some truth to it. But again, it's like, especially in media, it's literally a manipulation or a lie or a,
well, that's what I was going to say.
Belief they have that they're trying to like subconsciously seed into your mind.
Exactly. It's always about like what's the avenue it's coming from. And that's I mean, obviously if they're pushing it out in Hollywood in any way, shape or form, it's like, it's usually a spell. And again, it's like, if they can get people to believe these things that they seed, these ideas that they seed, and they can plant those seeds and people then believe them and run with it. Like it serves that whole deception because
it's entrainment.
Yeah, because I fully believe that the biggest reason that there is such a concerted effort to take us away from who we truly are and where we are and why we're here is because then we're more easily controlled. And Isaac and I were just talking about this yesterday about like the quote unquote powers that be, or the parasitic classes, Alex Zek calls them. I love that. It's a game to them. It's a game. They already have everything. They have all the money and all the power, and like they have all the material things. Like there's really not much else that they can obtain in this life, I believe. And so for them, it's about the power and control over others, because it's just megalomania on steroids. And I believe that's this game that they're playing, is like, okay, well, if they don't know who they are and why they're here and where they are, well, we can control them and we can do whatever we want. And it's just like, we're just pawns in their game.
Right. Which is not too far from what the Nag Hammadi scriptures talk about. So to me, it's like, for these discussions, what I don't hear enough of is going back to the text and saying what the text actually says versus extrapolations of it. And then the authenticity of the texts. Who wrote them? Was there manipulation from the authors in writing them, or were they pulling from something authentic? Where did they get these stories from? So it is really challenging looking at any scripture. It's just like part of the challenge of comparative religion, basically. But another point I want to make is that, and I end my book and end Upside Down Contact on this, because I talk about the spiritual war that I see playing out, and we see dark entities, light entities, interdimensional entities, that the Nag Hammadi scriptures say that light ultimately wins in the end, something like that. And also, if we take their origin story as generally true, even if there is a realm that's created by this demiurge that we are in, we still have the divine spark within us, and we still have some connection to the outer source, and that outer source is benevolent. So it's not all a prison, even if there is a prison within a prison. In the same way that a human being could like trap a mouse and put it in a cage, it still exists within the broader reality. So there could be levels to this, and it could be way more complex than people think.
Yeah, totally.
Have you had a chance to talk to Chance Garton?
I have.
Yeah, he's a good one to talk with all the linguistics and etymology of things. I'm curious what he would say about what Nag Hammadi means. I think I'm sure he's mentioned it several times. But
I actually think I chatted with him about this a little bit. Nag Hammadi, the term itself, I believe, is the location in Egypt. But there are questions as to the translation also, how it's translated. I think it was in Coptic and then translated into English in the 1970s. So who was translating it? How do we know it's accurately done? All very important questions. But I mentioned it because reading some of those texts, it's like, whoa, that's the world I live in that they're describing. And it's it's showing more nuance than some of these other stories of, oh, it's just love and light. Don't worry if they're suffering. You're just evolving. And like, maybe that's true, but maybe there's more to it.
Yeah.
And then also, I think if you look at the fractal nature of truth, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but the whole as above, so below, within, without, all that. There's I totally spaced on where I was going with that. Something about the effect of if you like Henry Ford said, if you believe you can or you can't, either way you're right. So I feel like that's kind of like a truth. I mean, you can say it's a belief or an opinion, but I see that in my own life and other people's lives. So part of these tricksters, these entities that are out there, some of them, they like you to believe things because they can't really make you do it. So you got to believe it so that you manifest it or you do it or you make make it a reality. So that's kind of where my stance is on some of these things where they put this idea out there. That's why it's in the movies. That's why it's always negative, but it's this learned helplessness thing. And I see this pattern of the learned helplessness on the small scale, on school. Like if you have somebody like you're always going to take something into your own hands and like, I can do better. If you're not very good at tennis, you're going to work your ass off and get better at tennis until you win as far as you can take it. Some people will look for excuses. Some people will just sit there and be like, oh, like he cheated. He worked they'll make excuses, but I'm like, that same behavior goes into the bigger realm and goes into the spiritual side of things. And so if there's a prison that we're inside of, and like there's another truth that I have, which is how to resist being in a prison. That was part of my training in the military. It was super fun. And it's like Rorschach from, what is that, Mystery Men or whatever? I don't know, whatever the movie was. But he's like, I'm not trapped in here with you. You're trapped in here with me. And it's like, we don't have to make it easy for him. Like, we can live a joyful, abundant, like happy life. And the more they try to like pile on the heaviness and the sadness and all these dramas and everything else. And that's why I really appreciated your presentation and the laughs that I heard in the crowd. These topics could be delivered with gravity and heaviness and all this seriousness. And you can also break that tension a bit and deliver it and get some laughs. And I like that versus the other. So whether we're trapped in here or not, like, might as well have a good time.
Well, and just to that point real quick, because I'd love to get your take on this, Mark. Like, I'm really of the opinion now that, like, take the Gnostic, that belief that this is like a loose prison and we're stuck in this reincarnation loop. I really do feel that if someone believes that to be true, that probably will be true for them. Like, whether it be in this 3D reality or spiritually, like if they really believe that to be true, maybe that does play out for them. But if you don't believe it, now obviously there are objective truths, but what's your stance on that, Mark, in terms of like multiple truths playing out simultaneously?
Yeah, I really am not sure. I've thought about that a lot, but I don't know how it works. I do. It seems to me that everyone is going through journeys of overcoming struggle in their own way, where there's something that they are being faced with that they need to transcend. And some would say that that's evidence that we are all souls evolving and trying to get to some higher level. To me, that's actually a compatible idea with the soul trap too, because the soul trap believers say that there is a way out if you figure out the deception. They'll say things like, you shouldn't commit suicide because that would take away from your time to figure out what to do in the afterlife. So you want to stay alive as long as you can to learn the way out in the afterlife. But that, even if that's true, it's still a version of evolution. It's learning how to discern this realm. So I do think no matter what the case is, there is something about struggle or learning, and usually struggle is the way in which learning occurs because it forces that. It's like if I go back to tennis days, when everyone's super competitive in Division I tennis, the distinctions between players is very small. So it's who's going to be out there in the gym longer or running sprints longer. And that's painful to do, but then it can lead to actually better performance in the end. So some of these challenges are things that we call evil. It's a tricky topic because evil is evil in certain ways when it's causing people pain knowingly. And yet that can cause people to grow as well. And the same would go for a notion of deception in the afterlife.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. I think there's an element to that because like these fractal things I was talking about, the reflections, and there's this trope. I think I internalized a bit too many movies when I was a kid, but I had that experience in the military. But it was from I think Riddick, the character Riddick in one of these films. It was that same thing. It's like, I'm not trapped in here with you. You're trapped in here with me. In prison. I don't know why that kept, I don't know. This struck a chord with me, the whole prison thing. But anyways, I think we can overcome it. I think we can at least make the most out of the time we have here. And there's so much, like you've written literally books about it. Like there's so much that we don't know. The average person is not aware of in this realm. And that's just, to me, that's just the beginning. So just that alone, just the fact that there's so much opportunity for awe and wonder and excitement, it's like, I don't think anybody can really claim like, oh, this is it. Like this is a prison. It's like, well, I haven't gotten to the prison bars yet. I'm still out here skipping through the fields with flowers. And like, there's dark moments for sure, but it's like, there's so much interesting things outside of that one perspective. So let's look at that.
To that point, we know there are things like pleasure and love that do exist here, even if it is some sort of a prison. And if it is a prison in the way that Nag Hammadi describes it, my understanding is that the controllers are jealous of the humans because they have the divine connection. And therefore there is something special. I mean, that's a big deal. So
Yeah.
it could be, it's a nuanced topic is what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I feel that too. I was thinking years ago. So I grew up Christian, but I remember some of the stories about Lucifer and Satan. It makes sense if that story's valid, that he would hate us because he ain't us. So suck it.
Have you in your book, Smart, because I imagine this kind of ties in maybe with like cosmos, the cosmology, and then the spiritual topics. Like you kind of broken down, like gone into the realm of religion and like what that serves, especially in terms of, because I didn't grow up religious, and but it's just really interesting, like being with Isaac now, we've had very different upbringings, but seeing that even though he was raised like, you know, very Christian and in different churches, and then got to a point where he realized like there was a lot of, you know, there's a lot of dogma and a lot of.
I used to be in a Christian metal band.
he was like deep in it. Whereas for me, I was raised like I was christened, like I was, you know, Christian Serbian Orthodox, but never, like we never went to church. We didn't practice. And my mum kind of went a little more down the route of new age spirituality, but she was raised Catholic, saw the problems with that. And then she explored lots of different philosophies. And like, so I was kind of raised with like, I knew a little bit about Buddhism, and I knew a little about Hinduism, and I knew a little about Christianity. And I kind of knew a little bit about all of these things. But for me, I actually was so disconnected from God because I didn't know what God was at all. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that God was something that you had to be religious to get to, kind of thing. Obviously, that's completely changed for me now. I have a very strong connection with God, and I know that religion really is just like this a control mechanism. It's like divides and conquers. It's another divide and conquer tactic. But did you ever delve into sort of religion when kind of going into more of the spiritual realm, and sort of what the real agenda is behind religion?
It's been a question for me since I started in 2016, because I was hearing about phenomena that sounded religious. Mm-hmm. The idea of a soul, or people talking about a God that we're connected to, it inherently brings one back to looking at religions. But it's something that I've wanted to do and I haven't done, which is to really dive deeply into any one of them. I mean, the challenge is that you could spend a lifetime on one religion and never get to the bottom of it. So it's a hard thing to want to study. And I guess I've done rough comparative religion in certain ways, especially in my book, An End to Upside Down Contact, on contact with non-human entities, looking at mythologies, quote unquote mythologies, and religious texts and what they're saying about encounters with beings that might have been called angels, or all different sorts of things throughout history that correlate with what people are describing in the modern era. And that's led me to look at why certain religions believe things, because of the stories of people who had those encounters. But it seems like religion, the institution, can sometimes distort the truth, or give a big chunk of truth and then twist it such that there's an intermediary that you have to go through the church or go through these human beings in order to get to God. So it's like another form of corruption where there could be good in it, and maybe there is in some cases, but then there's a lot of distortion, and then you get money and other problems involved too. Yeah.
And I love what you said earlier actually about, you know, especially when reading like historical texts and things like that. Because this is what I often say with religion. Because again, I was so averse to religion and the Bible and Christianity that I just kind of like threw it all out as like, oh, whatever. And now I've only just kind of been like, oh, wow, I think there's a lot of truth in the Bible, but it has to be read with so much discernment because of what you just said. And also just knowing that, like there's so, you know, they often say like there's so many books and things, like everything's hidden under the Vatican, and that like things that we don't even know, like books that have been taken out of the Bible, things that have been altered. And then when you look at like the translations and different times throughout history that it was translated, it kind of speaks to what you said earlier. And I think that's so important as well, because I think so many people will often be like, well, I read it in this historical text, so it's got to be true. And it's like, but there's so many other factors that you have to consider to even know whether it's going to be true or not. And I feel like, you know, a lot of what we're speaking about today, and I think so many people can relate to this also, is like the more you think you know, or the more you learn, like the more you realize you don't know. And it's like this endless journey of discovery.
Yeah. There's always a wall, it seems. of getting to close to a truth and realizing there are a million new questions, which is both exhilarating and frustrating.
Yeah, true.
So for you, Mark, on like to that point, like what do you, because I know for me, I'm often like now I'm kind of like, you know, we were actually listening to an interview with Steve Falconer. I'm sure you're aware of Steve Falconer and his stuff. Yeah. So, and you know, Isaac was listening again. Isaac's like knows way more about history and stuff than I do, especially like religious texts and stuff like that. And he was like, no, I don't agree with that and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you know what? I appreciate Isaac's opinion, but for me, I have absolutely no knowledge of any of that stuff. So I listen to these things with a really open mind, and I've listened to lots of different schools of thought around, you know, talk about like religion, for example. And so I can just listen with a really open mind. And for me, that's really what it's gotten to now for me. It's like I can listen to all these different things and just keep a really open mind and not really attached to any particular belief. But of course, I think we all have our core beliefs that sort of guide our life. So for you, Mark, like what are the things that you kind of are like, this is like a core belief. I couldn't live my life with meaning. I couldn't live my life meaningfully without these beliefs. And then what, like, well, I guess that's the question. Then like, is everything else to you just kind of like that, where you're just like, I'm open to everything. Like, I don't really know what the truth is.
To me, there's only one thing that is known with certainty, which is that in this moment, it feels like I'm having a conscious experience. And literally everything else is some form of inference. Even the idea that the two of you are conscious entities is a little bit of a leap of faith. I mean, I think it's a very reasonable assumption, but it's not, I don't know with certainty. I'm not inside your consciousness right now. And even the past 5 minutes ago, I really think it happened because it's in my mind, but it's in my mind in the present moment as a memory. Or if I look at a photograph, I'm looking at it in the present moment. We could do the same thing about the future. There's no certainty beyond the feeling of having consciousness right now. So with that said, I would say a core, the word belief then is just some degree of inference beyond that thing that I know of my own consciousness right now. And there are certain things that I would say I'm open to, but I'm not sure of. And other things I'd say, well, I can't verify it, but it's something that is guiding my life. And I would say the biggest one ties back to what I wrote about in my first book, An End to Upside Down Thinking. The reason it's called An End to Upside Down Thinking is that I'm challenging the core metaphysics of mainstream science, which is known as physicalism or scientific materialism, which is that everything can be reduced to matter, basically. And you started the universe with a big bang, and these particles were colliding and flying through space, and you have billions of years, and then you end up with the evolution of human beings on this planet Earth, and they evolve such that they have a brain, and out of their brain pops consciousness, their capacity for experience. That's the storyline, which means that consciousness is something that is derivative of the material world, and more specifically derived from a brain, even though no one has ever observed consciousness popping out of a brain. Never happened, but that's what a lot of people believe. They believe because the brain is correlated with conscious experience, and that's why we have neuroscience, it must be true that the brain creates consciousness. Well, no. Like if the brain's a receiver, like an antenna, just to put it very in a broad analogy, then you would have very similar patterns of correlations between brain activity and conscious experience. Like smashing an antenna on your television set, it makes the TV show scratchy on the screen, but it doesn't mean that the signal has been damaged. The only thing that's damaged is the apparatus that's receiving the signal. Okay, so materialism, and there are a lot of reasons beyond that why I think materialism is wrong. So that was a long-winded way of saying, okay, well, if consciousness is not something that is just popping out of the brain, popping out of the material world after billions of years, an alternative might be that consciousness is the fundamental substrate of all reality. And then we're getting into very spiritual territory of the source of our own existence then would not be something material. Materialism would say that the source of our existence is the random collisions of material things, ultimately, which led to human beings who reproduced and led to us. But it's ultimately the source of our existence is material. If the source of our existence is something immaterial, i.e. spiritual, and we are a vessel for that spiritual thing that is our source, then what else could we be doing here other than serving our source?
That's a radical idea, Mark. How dare you?
How dare I say it?
How dare you put that out there?
Yeah, that story, the Big Bang and all that.
As I was laughing as you were saying it, Mark. That's when you were speaking at the festival, and that's when you lay everything out, like everything they say, just in a nutshell. Like it's laughable. It's so funny when you just say what the narrative is, because it's so ridiculous. I mean, again, I don't think I ever even like really learnt about the Big Bang because I hated science at school, just didn't pay attention. But yeah, in adulthood, I hear it. I'm just like, that's so ridiculous. Because I always say, okay, well then what caused the Big Bang? It's still not a definitive answer as to how we came to be. It doesn't make any sense.
But this is why the comedian is so important with this. That was Owen's thing. He's like, the Big Bang was your parents, in the bedroom. It's like lightning strikes a pond of ooze, and then like a single cell splits into two cells. That's the zygote. That's the zinc flash in the seminal fluid and the vaginal fluid and all that. That's like the primordial ooze. It's actually a true story. It just takes 9 months, not a flibbity billion years. So maybe that's intentional, or maybe that's just a funny way to it's like kind of true, but it's just shorter. But yeah, it cuts through it. I like cutting through the bullshit, but then, it just shows people's worldviews too. It's something to have these experiences and have, I don't think they're just devoid of love, but it's like, there's things that are intangible things that are so valuable that move people to create things, to build things. So to think that it's just material, it's like, oh, it's just particles and this and that. It's like, what you do with the material matters more than material, in my opinion. And you could probably find plenty of evidence to stack into that category, so.
Yeah, give us a rundown, Mark. You said you have a lot of problems with materialism. Give us what's the short list?
Well, near-death experiences, that's a good place to start. Instances where a person, let's say they're in cardiac arrest, blood stops flowing to the brain, they're in a state of clinical death, and yet upon being resuscitated, they describe that while they were clinically dead, their consciousness hovered over their body, went into another room, it heard and saw things, and then the person went on to describe the things that their consciousness heard and saw, when their body was in a state that should not have been able to produce any lucid consciousness, let alone memories seen from a vantage point outside the body that the doctor and other people can verify as accurate. That is a functional, non-hallucinatory consciousness at a time where there's little or no brain functioning. Big problem for materialism. It's called a veridical out-of-body experience, meaning there's a verified memory that occurs during the out-of-body experience. And this has been studied by professors at the University of Virginia. There's a great book called The Self Does Not Die, which has documented over 100 of these cases. They're difficult to document because usually when someone's dying, the goal is to save the person. They're not doing consciousness research in order to actually know what was the physiology of the person's body, what was their consciousness doing, how do we verify this stuff? But there are cases where it has been verified. And Dr. Bruce Grayson from the University of Virginia, when I interviewed him for my podcast, Where is My Mind? He said to me, we're left with this paradox that at a time when the brain isn't functioning, the mind is functioning better than ever. In other words, it might be that the brain and the body, or the physical system, is limiting our consciousness. And in certain altered states, like when the brain gets out of the way, the broader reality becomes exposed, which is a big challenge to materialism. Materialism says, no. If you're going to have such an enriched consciousness, people will say that it's realer than real life in this near-death experience state. They have omnidirectional 360-degree vision sometimes. Realer than real at a time when the brain is barely functioning or completely off. And some people will say, well, there's a study here that showed there was a burst of electrical activity. You would need to demonstrate that one little burst is capable of producing this elaborate experience of many, many different things, which we could spend hours talking about what people encounter. There's no physiological explanation for a veridical out-of-body experience, a verified memory from a vantage point outside the body when the person's in clinical death or something close to it. Problem, you got a lucid consciousness and no brain. That is not what materialism says. Materialism says if you're going to have an enriched consciousness, you need a lot of brain activity. So we can just even stop there. And there are a lot of other examples. My book, An End to Upside Down Thinking, it's like chapter after chapter of things like that. Of materialism says this, there's scientific evidence of this. But at a more fundamental level, what are the problems with materialism? How do we know anything's material? How do we know? I touch my table, touch my leg. It feels like it's physical, but really all that's occurring is a sensation of when I touch something. It's in my consciousness that I'm describing a sensation that it feels like my hand is doing that, if you know what I mean. It's an experience within your consciousness that you are reverse engineering and doing mental gymnastics to say, there is a table here and a leg here in these different locations, and that's what I'm feeling. And even if we get down to the lowest level and try to see what's going on, there seems to be more and more inference. So scientists are always looking for the little billiard ball at the base of everything that's colliding into another billiard ball. And that's what's causing these reactions of matter, basically. And then we get into things like quarks and subquarks, always looking for the smallest unit. And if you ask people like Dr. Stephen A. Young, who spoke at the Living Free Festival as well, he's a theoretical physics PhD, and now he's speaking openly, challenging the notion of atomism. And atomism is the belief that there is a particle called an atom, which is the basic element of the physical world. So this is part of materialism, is you need to have atoms. Are there atoms? We hear a lot about electrons. Well, we see clouds.
What did they split? What did they split when they blew up Japan?
Well, that's the question. Did they split something? Or are they finding effects? This is a very common thing, that scientists will observe effects. They'll do a study and they'll be like, well, this thing happened. And then they come up with a model to explain why that thing happened. And they'll say, well, then there's an atom with these subatomic particles and the electrons here and the protons and the neutrons, and that's why this thing is what we observed. Versus maybe, as Dr. Young says, maybe we need to go back to the ancients, and they talked about the elements, earth, air, fire, and water, and ether, that there are these fundamental elements, and they are what comprise what we call the material world, but it's really more energetic or maybe etheric. Some would say that there is a background ether, and when ether is excited in different ways, we get different types of matter, we get different types of light. So in that case, nothing would be material. It's just ether acting in different ways.
Yeah, and just to clarify my stance on Japan, the was it Hiroshima and Nagasaki were not even in the top 10 most destroyed cities in Japan. At the time, Japanese reporters were reporting firebombing in those cities. And that's what I believe they were doing. They firebombed those cities. The whole notion of a nuclear bomb exploding in that thing. Well, just so happens after that, you probably know this whole story. There was only one person, one news reporter allowed to report on the nuclear bombs in Japan. Everyone else was literally either threatened with punishment by capital punishment, put to death. I don't think they actually killed anybody that was going to report on it, but that was the threat. There was one person authorized to talk about that and to tell the story of the nuclear bombs.
Yeah, there's a book by Professor Palmer, I can't remember the name of it, that goes through anomalies in the narrative. So the question is not, were there big explosions? The question was, were the explosions nuclear in nature? And this gets to a bigger question that a pattern that I'm finding, is that we're told there is a catastrophic potential of X, nuclear weapons, an asteroid that destroyed the dinosaurs that could do it again, human-caused climate change, microscopic viruses. These are things that threaten all of humanity. And when you dive into the mechanism behind what they're describing, it is always something that's not fully verified. And whether it's the work on looking at anomalies and what happened in Japan, or just questioning the atom itself, there are reasons to ask questions. And these are always things that an expert is required to tell us the answer. Because only an expert would know how an atom split and knows how to do the science properly. And the rest of us could never have insights into that. And the same with viruses. Only a virologist knows how to do the studies which allegedly demonstrates that a virus exists and so forth. So it's like this expert class they're the ones we're supposed to trust to tell us that this life-threatening thing exists, when in fact, maybe it's not what we're told.
Yeah, when I was studying nutrition, I literally went from hating science, never paid attention to science in school, dropped science as soon as I could in school, and then went on to study a Bachelor of Health Science. And that was just thrown in the deep end. And I just remember learning about the human body and really questioning everything. And it actually made my belief in God so much stronger, because I just thought, how have we been designed this perfectly? Like for me, there's no other explanation but God, like, but something greater than us. And, yeah, I just remember like thinking like, you know, when you see, you know, histology and the cells and the structure, I just used to always think, but how do they know? Like this, it's just like you said, it's just they come up with a theory and then they teach it as if it's completely true. And now, I mean, I've learned so much more about the human body and how it functions since my studies. You know, now like knowing that the studies that have shown like the heart is actually a vortex, it's not a pump, and our cells and the structure of our cells, are they really what they say they are? And like, I don't know, it's so funny because like going through any kind of mainstream education, I just think, and I think they're the most indoctrinated people. I think it's the people that go through, you know, 15 years of schooling or whatever it is, and then go into higher education and then go into the workforce or whatever industry or field that they're in. They're the people, like, especially I know during COVID, like they're the ones like, I'm a scientist, you can't argue with me, like about COVID. And it's like, but you just like literally parrot what you've been taught. They have no discernment or no critical thinking skills whatsoever.
Yeah, I have to tell you some stories about that. I've seen it a lot myself, just with colleagues and classmates who are very smart, highly educated, who find it so hard to believe that the experts could be wrong because they have a PhD or an MD. But the organization I mentioned before that I'm on the board of, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which for over 50 years has been studying in controlled studies the evidence for telepathy and the mind impacting the material world. So actually trying to look at this stuff, which you can't do in most mainstream academia. So we were co-sponsoring an event at MIT 2 weeks ago, and I was there. And one of our scientists, Dr. Dean Radin, actually spoke at Harvard Med School, which was unbelievable. I never thought I would see that happen, talking about psychic abilities scientifically.
Wow.
But at this conference at MIT, the way the scientists were talking about various phenomena like cellular biology and the way genetics works, and these narratives they were speaking about as if they are definitely true versus models, or the description of dinosaurs being taken out by an asteroid X number of million years ago. I mean, I'm thinking to myself now, having looked into this more and just like at least questioning the assumptions behind that, there are so many assumptions embedded in that dinosaur story, which it would be fun to go through that for a second. First of all, you need 13.8 billion years of the cosmos in order for that to line up, because there was a big bang that led to our solar system, which led to Earth, which has a certain timeline under the conventional cosmology. And you need that timeline to exist for Darwinian evolution and dinosaurs to have existed. So first of all, the dinosaur stuff depends on a cosmology, which, as we can discuss if you want, has not been verified at all. And then to say that we know something happened with biological entities that we've never actually seen millions of years ago. Think about the hubris there. How do we know that? Well, there's carbon dating. How can we verify that carbon dating is accurate that long ago? It's literally impossible to verify that method can tell you how old something is. And if you're trying to look at genetics, how do you know with certainty that what you're looking at now corresponds? So there's inference after inference. And then even the story about the notion that an asteroid took them out. And the scientists were speaking about it with such conviction that this is part of Earth's history and this asteroid took them out and that's why everything. Well, how do we even know they're asteroids? We know there are lights in the sky, and people see geological formations that they will call a crater. They'll say that was caused by a giant rock that fell from the sky, versus all we see is a geological formation and we really don't know what caused it, because there's a million other reasons that could exist. Like, for example, there are scientists that look at these craters and say this is what a geyser looks like when it's not wet, basically. Like, there are other ways, parts of geology that could explain these structures. But in any event, the idea that the crater that people see was caused by an asteroid that flew in from space, if that were true and we lived on a ball, a spherically shaped object with rocks flying through space, then you'd think there would be some craters with skid marks, because rocks would have to come in from the side too, not from directly straight above, which is what these craters look like every single time. Yeah. That's weird. And also, if it were that big to cause such a big dent in the ground, then it would be reasonable to say that such a large object would be found near the site of the crater, because it would be really hard to move such a thing that's never found. So it's like, inference on top of inference. They make up a story that becomes the model. And then anything outside of that, we're not allowed to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can get degrees in this shit.
I know, it's so crazy.
You can go into debt to the tune of like hundreds of thousands of dollars to put this on your shirt.
Unbelievable. It's like we found a dinosaur bone. Well, we found a bone. We found a structure that you're calling a bone, and you're inferring that it existed millions of years ago in this biological being that no one's ever seen.
They have one called a Titanosaurus. You know, the whole story of the Titans, you know, giants and all that. I looked that up. I was, you know, I learned a little bit about anatomy through my medic training and stuff. And which, by the way, we did the first 2 years of medical school, like doctor medical school. You can cram that into 6 weeks, and it's pretty hard, but there's harder things out there. So the whole thing with doctors and like, oh, I'm a doctor. It's like, okay, buddy, like you took 10 years. Like they really stretched that shit out for you. But the bones of the Titanosaurus, you look at it, compare it to a femur from a human, very similar. Structural, a little bit different. It's definitely, you know, you look at that next to like an elephant, not even close. Any other large mammal, or, I mean, if you can find a reptile with legs that big, nothing. No, like really like identifiable, like, yeah, this is exactly it. It's just, you know, you could tick it off. I didn't go through like Mike Wilkerson did and like tick off every, you know, anatomical thing on it. But some of those things, like I don't have to like look at it and analyze it and pick it apart. Just like you look at it and with different eyes, being able to question it, you can say like, there's a reasonable doubt that it's what they say it is, and then move on, you know, or, you know, I like digging into it as well. So I'm glad that you're writing books about this stuff, because when you put that many nails in the coffin, like let's just like nail this down, kind of like Alec did with the virology thing and disproving HIV and all these other things. I was like, yeah, dude, that's freaking awesome. Like put the nails in so we can close that chapter, or at least have a landmark to go back to and point to, like, okay, look at this, verify that. Assuming that, now where do we go from here? What do we do? Because I'm always about what do we do? Where do we go from here?
Yeah. Well, the cosmology it's so critical to so much of science, because what we're talking about now is we're getting to the realm of geology, basically, and in history. What is this place really? And it depends on this narrative of Big Bang and billions of years. But I think it's worthwhile to go through some of the assumptions in that cosmology, which I had not done until writing this book and Into the Upside Down Cosmos. I mean, I had heard people talk about it, but I hadn't looked into it too deeply. We start with 13.8 billion years ago, this event that caused the universe that we now know of. How do we know that that happened 13.8 billion years ago? Like, was anyone there? No. Mm-hmm. Okay. We can't even agree on what happened like 50 years ago or yesterday, let alone 13.8 billion years ago. And how do we know that it happened? Because there's radiation that people found, and they say, oh, this is the background radiation from the Big Bang. Oh, all you found is radiation. It's called the cosmic microwave background. Oh, this was caused by the Big Bang. Okay. Well, how do we know that 13.8 billion years ago? But this is my favorite part, is that in order for mainstream cosmology to work, for Earth to be where it is today as a spinning globe flying around the sun after billions of years, there needed to have been a period of rapid inflation at the Big Bang, where it expanded really quickly. And there's no known mechanism in physics for that to have been able to happen back at the Big Bang, which no one's ever verified. So they invented a particle called an inflaton. An inflaton particle that caused rapid inflation at the Big Bang. No one has ever found an inflaton.
Oh.
Yeah, but it's called inflaton. It makes perfect sense.
It had to have been there. So it's like we could even stop right there, and that should be enough for people to say we got big problems, but it doesn't even stop there. Because in order for mainstream cosmology to work, scientists have to plug in 96% of the universe, and they call it dark matter and dark energy. These entities that are unknown, but they must exist, otherwise physics is broken, in short. And we know physics is broken because the two leading theories, general relativity, which is Einstein's theory, and that's allegedly describing things on galactic, very big scales, and then quantum mechanics, which is allegedly describing things at the really, really small scales. Those two theories are incompatible. So when you bring them together, the equations metaphorically blow up. As Michio Kaku says, he's a mainstream physicist, we're off by a factor of 10 to the 120th power.
Right.
So there's physics
big.
on it's massive. 1 with 120 zeros after it. That's how much we're off. So we need this physics in order to explain the Big Bang, and it's broken. It's off by that much. And you had to plug in 96% to make it work. And then in order for things to be flying around in the way that we're told, you need to have gravitational force. So we know things move. We know an apple falls to the ground. We know things are moving in the sky. The question is that caused because of a mystical force called gravity, which Newton would have said that happens because the mass of Earth, for example, is bigger than the mass of the apple. So it pulls the apple to the ground. There's some force inherent in matter. Unfortunately for Newton, his theories were unable to explain some basic things like Mercury's motion around the sun in the sky is unexplained by Newtonian physics. So then Einstein's physics came in, which is supposed to be a refinement. And it's not that mass is attracting mass, so to speak. It's more that when you have mass, it's bending and warping space-time. Like if you took a medicine ball and put it on a trampoline, it bends the trampoline. So imagine every piece of mass, every big planet and rock, they're all bending and warping space-time in this perfect way such that Earth is here and the moon's 238,000 miles away and the sun's 93 million miles away and so forth. And that's all Einsteinian general relativity. Big problem, among others, is that in 1933, there was an astronomer looking at a cluster of galaxies called the Coma cluster, and things were not moving as would have been predicted by Einstein. In other words, there was missing mass. There wasn't enough mass there for things to be moving that way. Missing mass on the order of 99+% of the mass wasn't there. So, 2 options. Option 1, rethink Einstein and rethink why things are moving and falling to the ground and why things move in the sky, or claim that there is dark matter. So they discovered dark matter in 1933. There you go. And think about how significant this is. You need Einstein to explain all the motion that we see out there and explains the Big Bang and so forth. Whoa, they had to plug in dark matter.
He was in the Big Bang for sure. He's banging his cousin.
But to make matters worse, scientists have now been studying dark matter for almost 100 years, and they still don't understand what it is. And there are some scientists, including astrophysicist Pavel Krupa at the University of Bonn in Germany, who has been looking at dark matter with his colleagues for over 2 decades. And he's now publicly saying, dark matter does not exist. We have falsified it with more than 5 sigma statistical confidence, meaning 99.999+% confidence. The predictions that you would expect if dark matter existed are not there. And he said, yet many scientists and astronomers and astrophysicists are studying dark matter because that's where the funding is going and that's where the prizes are awarded. So it's a sociological pressure that's making people still want to study this thing. So, okay, let's just say dark matter, which they plugged in, has been falsified. We've got problems because now gravity doesn't work in the way we're told. And therefore, this massive expanding universe, starting with the Big Bang, that has big problems. Okay, so we haven't verified a Big Bang. You need an inflaton in order for it to work. You need Einstein's relativity, which seems to be highly problematic, and we could go into that way longer. But then, what else have we been told? That we live in a solar system where the sun is at the center, and there are planets revolving around the sun. Mars, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and so forth. We've all seen the picture since we were little kids. No one has ever observed that model. That's never been observed with the sun at the center and each planet revolving around it. That's a model. No one's ever observed it. And then there's Earth, where we live. The model that we see everywhere is this globe that's spinning on a tilted axis at roughly 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, which is faster than the speed of sound, which no one feels. And at the poles, it's not moving very much because if you think about a sphere rotating, it moves different rates depending on where you are. But we don't feel those differences at different latitudes, right? But
yeah, you can fly from the equator north, at the same speed and get there predictably. It's like it's not turning underneath you, like all of that.
Yeah.
It's just endless.
But so that's how we're tilting. We're spinning on the tilted axis, wobbling in multiple different ways, and then flying around the sun in a state of constant free fall at over 60,000 miles an hour. No one has ever observed that happening, Earth free falling around the sun. And then we're going around the Milky Way galaxy at over 500,000 miles an hour and then expanding in an ever expanding universe because that's what happened after the Big Bang at over 1 million miles an hour, all these things happening all at once. And we don't feel any hint of motion ever unless there's an earthquake. So that's the story about our Earth's motion. So it has never been directly observed. And then the idea that we live on a spinning globe, that meaning a oblate spheroid shape with a radius value of 4,000 miles-ish at the equator, that would be an easy thing allegedly to verify for a space agency like NASA with a $25 billion a year budget and allegedly sending probes out into deep space and sending people to the moon decades ago, to have video footage of a spinning globe, meaning a full sphere doing a full rotation with uninterrupted footage 24 hours, and you zoom in and you see people on the top standing upright with buildings that are upright, hanging sideways on the side, and simultaneously hanging upside down on the bottom, and you have this huge oceans that are sticking to a ball. You'd want to see an entire sphere, not just parts of it, not just CGI composite images of part of it where there's implied curvature or fisheye lenses that make it seem like it's curved, or circularity when actually you would want to see down and away curvature for a sphere, because you could have a circle that's round because of the way our eyes see. My point is, the whole cosmology, just take it back. The Big Bang, Earth revolving around the sun, Earth as a spinning globe on a tilted axis, none of these things has been directly observed. It's all a model. And we could apply this to many other domains too, like medicine as well. But think about the implications of that. We are taught to believe we're on this pale blue dot, one of many planets in this ever-expanding universe, one of many solar systems, and the sun is just one gas giant out of many. And yeah, we might be important spiritually, but we're just an insignificant dot. Versus, well, there's evidence perhaps that Earth is at the center and stationary. And the minute you go there, the notion of a higher intelligence comes into play, which is not what mainstream science likes. There's something known as the Copernican principle, which is the idea philosophically, we're not special. We don't occupy a special place. Stephen Hawking said, we believe this on principles of modesty. So what did scientists do? They took observations and they always force fit it into heliocentrism, where the sun's at the center, because they didn't want Earth to be special. And therefore, we end up with these models of expanding universe, and Edwin Hubble who came up with it, because they had to force fit their observations into this model such that Earth would not be special.
Have you ever looked at the sky at night with night vision goggles? Oh man, you're in Texas. You can probably you could buy them in the States. They're pretty expensive, like $4,000 or $5,000. But if you know somebody, find somebody with night vision and go check it out. I saw a video. I have it saved on my phone, but Owen would do this. Owen Benjamin, he would do this on his phone. He'd have his night vision on the phone lens, and he'd be showing it at night and just talking mad gravy. And he caught this shooting star, and you can see it, and you can slow it down. It comes in off the frame, zoop, and then freezes right there. And you can pause it before. There's no dot in this little space. This thing flies in and stops instantaneously.
Wow.
There's all kinds of things like that. If you watch closely, you can observe with night vision especially, but even with the naked eye. It's wild, and I have no idea what that is or what it means.
There are lights in the sky. I know that's true. What they are, how far away they are, how big they are. It might be the case that a lot of what we think is that these are really far away and huge might be really close and small.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's so interesting because, that opens up such a whole can of worms. So what you said, it's like, what's the sort of underpinning, belief system that they're trying to get people to take on? So what you just said, Mark, 100%, like, we're insignificant. There's nothing special about us.
Helplessness.
Yeah. And also, I think a huge one with the whole Earth, the shape of the Earth topic, is like the scientific narrative, the quote unquote scientific narrative to me, it's like it gets people to not even trust what they can see, what they can observe with their own eyes and with their own bodies. And I think that's when you're getting into this territory of, like, to me, that's like deception on the deepest level. Like when you can't even trust the body that you're living in and the things that you observe, like that's when I just think you can get people to believe anything.
Yeah. I mean, think about what we're told. We're moving in all these ways simultaneously, and no one has ever felt Earth's motion outside of an earthquake. So we have no direct experience of the thing we're told. And then we've never directly observed spherical down and away curvature in everyday life. We see circularity. If you go out into a big field, it's called an azimuthal grid of vision. It has to do with the way we see, but circular, that's hemispheric. That's not down and away. We've never
Right.
observed down and away curvature. We've seen things and then inferred down and away curvature. So my point to what you're saying, Alexa, is that if we didn't have physicists running math and who knows what else, we would never believe motion and spherical curvature. We have to rely on the experts who have a PhD, and we should just trust them.
Yeah, that one's really, really crucial too, because people are like, "Oh, it's so big you can't see the curve." Okay,
that's a nice rationalization, but still, we have no direct evidence.
Now get in a hot air balloon, which you can do, and there's other people that have verified this as well in history, like one of the earliest explorers. But they describe it as they go up, because the thing is, if you're on a flat plane, the horizon comes at eye level, or roughly. The higher you go, if we're on a curve, just like you said, you should be down and away. So the horizon should be down there as you go up, and it should drop. Well, you go up as far as you can in a hot air balloon, and your horizon level is still roughly where it is when you're on the ground. No change. So
rises to eye level.
Something's going on.
I mean, if people really wanted to do that analysis of down and away curvature, they would not just, we would have to look at how we could do the math based on the geometry of what we're told Earth is as a sphere, how much down and away curvature you would see at different altitudes. Not just what we see as, oh, here's this image, and we're not even going to tell you what kind of lens we used, and it sort of looks round, and therefore that proves the globe. No, tell me the altitude. Let's look at how much down and away curvature. Let's look at the atmospheric conditions in the distance. It's way more complex than people make it out to be.
Yeah.
It's got to be measurable, identifiable, repeatable, all those things to qualify as the scientific method. And I think, well, I don't know if they even teach that in school anymore. Like, what is the scientific method and why it matters so much? It's such a simple thing when you actually learn it and remember it. But people are taught scientism. They're taught, or even scientody. They're taught the study of what science is, but they're not actually able to identify what the scientific method is, so they can use it in their own life and explore these things. Which some people come at it instinctually. Like you can do that with sports. You can learn. You can intuitively feel trajectories of things and run to meet the ball. And other forms of that, like operating in the physical world, creating something, fixing a problem. You don't have to know all the ins and outs and everything to make it work. You can explore later why it works, and you can come up with theories and ideas. Like that still does my head in with what my product does. I make something for muscle recovery, sport recovery, and all that. And I'm still kind of operating off the idea that there's a sodium potassium pump and magnesium that helps bring the sodium and potassium across the cell membrane and all this. And that's critical to think about, but maybe that's not what's going on. But all I know is, it allegedly buffers lactic acid, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe you just put it on as magic and you go fast, I don't know.
Well, it's possible for something to work without necessarily knowing why it works. Like an antiviral drug, quote unquote, it doesn't necessarily work because it kills a virus. Like when I wrote my book, An End to Upside Down Medicine, there were two doctors who read it before it was published, Dr. Andy Kaufman and Dr. Mark Bailey from New Zealand. And I asked him about antivirals, and he's like, it could be basically an anti-metabolic agent or a process in the antiviral, quote unquote, and it stops a metabolic process, and therefore the symptom goes away, but not because it killed a virus. So you could have something that works where the mechanism is misunderstood. And if you spoke with Dr. Tom Cowan, he has lots of questions about the nature of the cell and the sodium potassium pump. I haven't looked as deeply into that, but at a cellular level, there's probably a lot of myth and models that we don't know exactly what's happening.
Yeah. Or placebo effect. It works because someone believes it works. We really don't know. That's when you look at placebo studies, there's so much evidence to prove that that's a lot more powerful. Again, comes down back to the power of belief.
Wouldn't that be funny if we come out of this and we just end up being early, the superstitions about little gremlins and stuff, and it's got bad blood in it. We just come back to that and everyone's just bleeding each other again.
Oh God.
Who knows what the ancients were doing? They might have had methods to some of their madness.
I'm going to ask you a question now, Mark, and I'm going to word it very carefully because I know that you are a man that does not make claims. But in terms of this realm that we're in, the Earth, the shape of the Earth, this place that we are, I know you'd never claim to know what it is, but what do you feel based on your research, based on your intuition, based on the things that you as an individual observe, what do you feel like is the most likely explanation for this realm that we're in?
The term I use in my book, An End to the Upside Down Cosmos, is globe skepticism. And I find that people see that as less intimidating than other ideas out there because it doesn't posit a definitive alternative. And I'm really hesitant to say what this place is because we literally cannot know based on current observation. We haven't been high enough to observe the entire place with enough independent observation to see the full thing. Like I said, we don't have video footage of a full sphere as it's claimed. And if it were something else, if it were a flat topographical plane where there's a toroidal field of energy or something, we'd have to get to a much higher level to see that full thing, which we haven't been able to do. Secondly, we haven't been able to dig down far enough to know what's going on. So if we live on a globe with the radius value of roughly 4,000 miles, then we should be able to get to this alleged core of Earth, this molten core 4,000 miles down, which I would have thought would be pretty well verified, except the farthest digging expedition ever is under 8 miles down. So we have no idea what's below us, basically.
Yeah, 8 miles is not very far for
It's
digging.
it's not that compared to 4,000 miles, and then people are making claims about a molten core, and then Earth's magnetic field, which comes from the outer core, which no one has ever found, and the way that things are moving using the geodynamo effect, and that's why we have the magnetic north and south poles. So no one's ever even been there, and no one has ever replicated a geodynamo effect. So like these are big problems again.
Wait, what's the geodynamo effect again?
It's something that causes the magnetic field of Earth, allegedly, because we know there's magnetism. Which just what's generating that, and the idea of the outer core causing it, because the inner core, which no one has ever been to, is too hot. Do, like these stories that no one has verified.
What do you make of the final experiment where they went to Antarctica and allegedly saw the sun going around in a circle?
Yeah. So for your audience's benefit, if you're not familiar, this was December 2024. There was an expedition to Antarctica, to one location in Antarctica. That's really important because Antarctica is a massive place. I mean,
by
it
a
would
group
be like
of flat earthers, yeah.
But yeah, so there were most of the people that went were globe believers, and there were 3 flat Earth believers that went. So the majority, it was run by the globe Earth people, and the flat Earth people said that it was very skewed in terms of like how things were set up. The flat Earthers got there late, whereas the globe Earthers had more time to set up, and like it sounded like there was some sketchiness, but I'm not super close to it. In any event, they went to one location in Antarctica and are now trying to make claims about all of Antarctica, which is strange because I mean you could visit Manhattan and say that's like being to North America. There's a lot more there. I mean, Antarctica is supposed to be this huge place. But in any event, the idea was to look at the behavior of the sun in the sky over a 24-hour period. Because if the globe model were true, in the summer in Antarctica, you would see the sun in the sky for 24 hours. And they observed the sun in the sky for 24 hours. And they said, therefore, we have debunked flat Earth. We've proven the globe. To me, it's not the final experiment. Because it's not an experiment, it's an observation. It's a single observation in one location at one time. So instead of the final experiment, it should be called the single observation. Now, why is it problematic? It's problematic because of something known as affirming the consequent, logical fallacy. If it rains, the grass outside will be wet. I observe wet grass, therefore I conclude that it rained. What else could cause wet grass? Sprinklers, dew, children running by who poured water all over the grass, or a million other things, maybe parts of biology that we don't understand. So what the broader point here is that when you observe something that a model can explain, it doesn't mean that model is correct. So just because the globe model does accurately predict that observation, it doesn't mean that the globe model is necessarily true. And that's what I think is being overlooked. We don't know what other reasons there could be for a 24-hour sun in the sky. There are flat earthers like Joe Hanvey. He has a YouTube channel where he talks about a superfluid medium above us. We're on a flat topographical plane with a firmament above and a superfluid medium. If you shine a light through it, you end up with points on the outside of the circle where you would have a sun for 24 hours. I don't know if that's true or not. But the point is there are creative ways in which this could occur under conventional, under more like a non-globe method. Also, we'd want to have this experiment or this observation done in many, many locations in Antarctica, not just one base. So what do I think about it? I think it has been blown out of proportion because it's been taken to prove something. Just because the globe model can accurately predict it doesn't mean the globe model is true. It doesn't prove flat Earth either. It's just an important observation that would need to be replicated a lot. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing. It's like, again, what we're so conditioned to believe is that if it's not this, then it's got to be that. It's the left and the right. It's the blue and the red. It's like you've only got two options. And it's like, that's what people are like, well, if it's not a globe, then, you know, they look at the flat Earth stuff. And don't get me wrong, like I love listening to Dave Weiss because I actually love like he's actually done experiments. Like they experiment with this stuff and it's stuff that it's replicatable. And so a lot of that, like I listen to it and I'm just like, well, that makes a lot more sense than the globe theory. However, there have always been things in the flat Earth theory, because that's all it is a theory, that I'm like, I don't know about that. And like people, it's like they can't, it's like it has to be one or the other. It's like they can't have this nuance.
What about the have you heard of the crater Earth stuff? That it's like a puddle inside this crater, but it's still this giant ball that's like way bigger. There's a guy I made friends with at the market who's writing a book exploring this a bit more. And it doesn't sound like it's in a cosmology in space with the same curvature, all that stuff. It just, I'm like, why do you guys got to keep going back to the ball? Because
who knows? We would have to be able to explore way more than we can currently. With the Antarctic Treaty from the late 1950s, there was a restriction placed on free and private access of Antarctica. Right. So how can we even know? We don't even know how much space is out there in terms of beyond the lands that we know, not just in terms of what we know above us. So I think these are cool theories to look at. I would just love to see direct observation of them. And because we can't explore Antarctica freely, because we haven't dug down very far, and because we haven't seen things from above, I don't think we can know. And that's why I'm much more comfortable with globe skepticism versus saying, I know for sure. Like we cannot verify another map fully because we haven't explored everything and we haven't been able to see it from all vantage points.
Yeah. Yeah. And we just need a couple of billionaires. I mean, not even billionaires,
multimillionaires,
like realistically to go into this, because you've seen the Go Fast rocket, right? They shot it up. It's spinning. What if you had a Go Fast rocket, but you just have it drop off a couple of little small drones? Those are, things that, I mean, Ukraine was making in their freaking backyard and throwing at the Russians and stuff. But as it goes up, it just drops these things off that can be stationary and just take some photos and then be collected. But, there's not overly complex, expensive ways to do this stuff. In fact, there's, kids that are just making their own drones and stuff these days. So I think we can do this. But the same thing with Antarctica. We've gotten to the point with technology. I think we could probably pull it off with I'm thinking like a tactician, but like a drone swarm that goes in multiple directions with enough, fuel battery life on these things where they can't guard every angle of Antarctica at the same time. I feel like their control over it and their monopoly on it and this threat and this idea that they may be real, maybe not real, kind of like the, what's that thing? The Panopticon, where if you go there, they'll sink your ship. I've heard things like that, where there've been some people that went on their own accord to Antarctica. Their ship was, they ended up swimming and they got picked up by the Navy. Maybe that's not true. Maybe we can actually just go there. I don't know. I probably won't be the first one to go try it out. If somebody wants to do an expedition there, like, I might be involved. I'd be down to go. But I think we can push forward and explore these. So I'm calling it out, man. If you know anybody in the finance, it's like you put the thought in their mind. Now they're starting to question the shape of the Earth, and they have access to capital. Like let's explore this, man. Like why not?
Yeah, let's see it. I hope more and more people start paying attention, because often they will hear a straw man version of non-mainstream cosmology and just shut it down, because they'll say, oh, well, I saw this photo from NASA, and therefore they haven't looked into the many, many problems that exist. So let's get more people interested.
I just want to circle back a little bit before we wrap up, just quickly. I'm just curious, have you looked into like more of the quantum side of things? Because I know that that's become wildly popular in more recent times, like in terms of, you know, when we talked about like materialism and matter, and whereas like quantum, I think it's quantum physics specifically that sort of explains everything more as energy, and it's actually the space within the cells that's like the most important thing and whatever. But then I know there's a lot of problems with that theory. Have you looked into that and sort of like, you know, whether it does explain some things, or again, if it's just like this scientific theory that like they just have to keep making up more things to make it make sense?
It is something I looked at, and it was actually one of the hooks for me when I first started researching in 2016, because quantum physics demonstrates that there are some strange things that occur, like entanglements where you have particles that are far away from each other in space and or time. And when you affect one particle, the one that's far away is affected at the same instant in a correlated way, which suggests there's something interconnecting those two things. And Einstein called this spooky action at a distance. So, and I had remembered learning about that years before. And so I was like, oh, this quantum stuff, maybe that's related to psychic abilities. Dr. Dean Radin wrote a book called Entangled Minds, where he tries to make those relationships. He shows that there might be something there. So in my book, in Upside Down Thinking, I have a chapter on physics. I talk about relativity, which I don't agree with anymore, but I lay out what Einstein said. And I talk about quantum mechanics too. I think there are effects that are observed consistently, like entanglement. And then there's also the double slit experiment. Basically, whether or not someone is observing the experiment changes whether something looks like a wave or a particle. That's how it's typically interpreted. There are a bunch of very strange things that are called quantum. But I would direct your audience to Dr. Stephen A. Young. He has a YouTube channel, and he put out a video within the last few months in 2025 here about problems with quantum physics. And he shows in the beginning of that video his PhD thesis. Like, he was the guy to talk about quantum physics. And he's basically saying that the distinction that most people are making in physics, they'll say there's classical physics, which is what's happening on bigger scales, and then there's quantum at the really, really small scales. But we don't really know where the cutoff line is, where it goes from quantum to classical. And he says, maybe it's all just one thing. And we have to rethink, are there actually particles at all? And what I was talking about before, this notion of the ether, which in ancient times was known as the fifth element, that there might be a background medium that could explain phenomena like this. Because if there's one medium connecting everything, then you could have entanglement and other very strange things where the medium is excited in different ways. And in which case you wouldn't need to have some of the explanations that people are talking about. And that's a very high level overview of what Steve Young talks about. Again, it's not denying that there are observations and studies. It's the mechanism behind it. And it might be different than what we're told. And I do think it's a great question, Alexa, because there's so much talk about quantum these days and trying to make these leaps of, well, quantum says this sort of, and then this happened. So we're going to call it quantum healing, and we're going to call it quantum computing and all these things. Yeah. So I'm more skeptical of the mechanism that we're told. And another point I should add is when I've been around a lot of people who are in, like, let's say the business of quantum. And what I find over and over again is that no one knows what's going on. They're using technologies. They're technologies that seem to work, but no one has a clue about what's exactly going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And for our audience, stay tuned because we are getting Steve Young on very soon. Good. I don't know how many episodes away he is, but he's coming on very soon and I can't wait. And I'm actually glad you brought that up because we will definitely dive deep with him on the quantum stuff because like even in the, I use, they don't even call it a modality, but a form of energy psychology called Psych K. And they've done a lot of scientific research, like they do brain scans and things like that. But they often will refer to like these quantum science. And it's like, it's convenient because it does explain a lot of things. But then, I know that there are, again, a lot of things that are just like, does that really make sense? And again, it's like one of the, because that's what they do in science. Like I say this all the time. It's like they come up with this theory and then they come up with another theory to make that theory make sense. And then they're going to come up with another theory to make all that fit. And they just keep coming up with all these theories that don't really make sense, but they just feed that as like, well, that's the truth and that's what it is and that's the narrative. But when you start looking into it, it's like you just pull one thread and the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah, house of cards. Dr. Tom Cowan calls it inventive reasoning. That you have a model and then you observe something. So you need a post hoc rationalization, something that you just invent out of thin air to explain that one thing. And then you invent another thing and you have this house of cards where the foundation is totally not there.
Yeah. Yeah. We got to be careful not to keep doing that same pattern, or we'll end up in the same spot 50, 100 years from now.
Yeah.
With all the freedom community, just creating a whole nother paradigm that doesn't exist. And yeah, I think we're on a good start though, because we got people like you writing books to help, one, educate us how to go about thinking about things, like how to think instead of just what to think. It's cool just to see you model that for people. And I'm excited. I'm gonna pick up your books. I know we're gonna be in touch in the future, and
Sure.
yeah, once we start having chillin', having kids.
Oh yeah, that's going to be part of our homeschool curriculum. We're going to read all the Mark Gober books together.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. This is this is a series of stuff that I think is, I'm grateful for you taking the effort, doing what you do just out of who you are. And
I've got to say, for anyone listening, because I know when I first came across you, Mark, the thing I love about you the most is I think your books and like your material, like the stuff that you put out is really perfect for people that like need the science, because not that you're claiming to know what things are, but it's like you literally go and like look at all the science and break it down to disprove the mainstream narratives. And I think for a lot of people in the mainstream, like in mainstream society, they kind of need that to even get their foot in the door of like thinking about the possibilities of other things. So anyone listening, like I highly recommend, if you know someone that you're just like, I always try and tell them this thing and they don't listen and I don't have the facts, it's like, go and get one of Mark's books and like give it to them. Christmas is coming. Give it to them for Christmas. And yeah, I think that can be really helpful for some people. Obviously everyone's different, but I think, yeah, especially I always think of men, like men always want the facts. Like they just want things laid out factually and like easily laid out. So where can people find your books and your work and get in contact with you?
My website is a good place to start. It's markgober.com, markgober.com. All the books are on Amazon and they're in hard copy, Kindle, and Audible formats. I narrated all of the Audibles myself.
Oh, awesome.
So if you prefer that, go that route, which I know about half my readers prefer audiobook.
Yeah.
And my podcast series, which is where some people like to start, even though it came out in 2019, it's still relevant because it's about the nature of consciousness, called Where Is My Mind with Mark Gober and Blue Duck Media, my producers. 8 episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the major players. It does go in order, so it's best to start with episode 1 and go up to episode 8, but it's something that you can binge in like 4 to 5 hours. And it goes into telepathic abilities, near-death experience. I will say to your audience, if you listen to this interview first and then go to the podcast, at that time there were paradigms I was not aware of. So when I talked about Earth and viruses, I was using those as analogies, but I hadn't even looked into those paradigms. Otherwise, you'll be good.
Fair enough.
I love that. I'm probably going to go and binge that. I didn't even know that you had a podcast series on all of that. That's right up my alley. So I can't wait to listen to that.
We got an 8-hour drive next week.
Yeah.
All right.
You're back home. So
yeah.
Sweet.
And a really random question I have to ask. Do you know human design at all, Mark?
I do.
Do you know your human design? Okay.
Yes.
Are you a generator?
Yeah, I'm a 1-3 generator.
Knew it. I knew it. And I knew you had a one line because I was like, it's just funny because even you just mentioned it with the podcast again, which reminded me like start at the beginning, go through. That's a generator. Like we're just going to go step by step. We're going to do it very linearly. And like the way your books have progressed. And then the one line, of course, you're an investigator. Yeah. That's 100%.
It's cool how that lines up. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. 1-3 generator, all centers defined except throat.
Wow. Very interesting. And very interesting. I often, when we, speak to people in these spaces and that, are more public figures, it's very interesting when they have an undefined throat because often like that you can communicate. It's almost like you are able to like take in like the things that you learn and then communicate what others say and amplify it because you're amplifying it. So yeah, really interesting. Awesome. Very, very interesting.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks for all the work you're doing. And I can't wait until the next time we hang out.
Yes.
Thanks, Mark.
We're gonna come down and see you in Texas. We'll let you know when we're on our way. So
sweet.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for coming on. Can't wait to see you again.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Natural AF podcast, where we explore holistic healing modalities, mindsets, and methods that reconnect us to nature and our natural state of being.
If something resonated, share this episode and see the show notes for our guest links, as well as all of our discount codes for our aligned affiliates and natural art form, where we handcraft a range of organic, natural remedies that help support your body's natural healing abilities and help support the show.
If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please take a few seconds to leave us a rating and review. And if you're watching on Rumble or YouTube, hit the like button and drop us a comment, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for the latest updates.
We're not here to conform, we're here to remember what's real. So step into your power, be curious, and be natural AF.